All right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Sean Odell, and you have joined the Industrial IoT Edge Device and Application Management Made Easy session. I lead the marketing organization here at Portainer. We're really excited to have you on board. And we actually did one of these sessions earlier today, my time. And so you might be joining us in some cases from maybe on Friday, depending on where you are in the world. And we really do thank you for joining and taking the opportunity to be with us today. Wanted to make a quick mention of some important things. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So in your Zoom screen, you have a Q&A option. We definitely want to hear your questions, kind of see maybe how you're using Portainer, or maybe a little bit more in-depth detail from Andrew, our presenter today, depending on what he's showing. And really excited to have you all. The other thing, though, is we released 2.19 a couple weeks ago. If you have not upgraded, we've got a .release 2.19.1 that's out. We recommend you all take a look. There's a lot of new features around Industrial 4 and IIoT. And as I said, welcome, Andrew. Welcome to not only welcome to Portainer, but welcome to the webinar, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I'm excited to be here today and to show a little bit of the features that are new in Portainer, specifically for Edge and Industrial IoT. I think it's some really exciting stuff. A little bit about me. My background is in development, coming from distributed systems and I guess more traditional IoT background. So familiar with different types of distributed protocols, et cetera, but mostly from the development side. So since joining Portainer, really been excited to get involved in more of the operational aspects, how to handle a product or an application lifecycle, how to get the software where it needs to go on the proper devices. And also to address the needs that we have been seeing in the industry, especially with regards to adoption of IoT. So very excited to present for you today.
Awesome, man. Glad to have you. And I mentioned this before. If you haven't heard the latest and greatest news, their new Raspberry Pi was announced, and it is a fantastic piece of machinery. Just so everybody's aware, I have a 5-node Raspberry Pi cluster sitting in my home lab at the house. So don't let the marketing title fool you too much. But I'm really excited to hear this topic conversation. And just to help everybody out, a little bit of the agenda for today, we're going to look at challenges facing IIoT. This is something near and dear to us. We've been putting a lot of effort, a lot of conversation. We have some fantastic partners and community members and customers that are leveraging Portainer in manufacturing and smart homes and smart cities and just really a variety of areas. And really want to just kind of share with you all some of the problems, challenges that they're seeing, and some ways we've helped solve that, and ways we're going to continue to do it. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about security. Security is valuable and important. Actually, I just had a session with a partner, and the conversation became around making sure that infrastructure and security were aware and known in terms of how valuable they are in the IoT space. But they really need to be kind of simplified and hidden and just make it secure by default. I believe is probably the better way to put it, which is something we definitely take pride in here at Portainer. And then at the end, if we have time for Q&A, if maybe questions were answered or asked that we didn't answer live, maybe we'll save some time at the end. But feel free to leverage the Q&A in the chat window. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and let him kick us off and get started, man. Good luck.
Thanks, Sean. All right, so let's get kicked off with just going over the basic issues that industrial IoT is facing today. As we know, industry has a lot of different requirements, from security, from a usability perspective, for integration with different systems. I mean, obviously, the operational technology world, so to speak, developed very independent of the IT world. And now that we're trying to kind of mix these two worlds together, using for analytics, for offloading data to different types of web services, et cetera, certain concerns come up, or certain challenges come up to be able to integrate such products. So yeah, I basically just briefly mentioned it right there. Operational technologies are hardly support IT services out of the box. I mean, you have the hardware manufacturers, they have their own integrated vertical solutions. So, for PLCs, you'll have everything from the PLC level controls all the way up to the cloud, but then you're locked into one particular service. Additionally, those types of integrations are very costly, and they leave you without the knowledge in-house of how to actually modify those setups. Let's say you add new hardware, new infrastructure. How do you make them all work well together? So that's one of the challenges that we see in the industrial IoT space right now. Another one is there's a massive difficulty in provisioning large amounts of hardware. It's not time or money or costly or cost efficient to be provisioning each device that you're putting into your industrial space by hand. You don't want to have to send a technician out there to be able to provision these devices. You want to be able to do this as easily and as remote as possible. So that's one of the big issues, is provisioning these pieces of hardware with the right software to make sure that you can even run your applications for industrial IoT. And that brings me then to my next point: how to manage the lifecycle of IoT applications. You need to provide certain configurations depending on the device, what they're doing, potentially what environment they're in. You could have the same device, but two different factories, for example, where they require different types of configurations to get their correct results. So right now, you'd have to send technicians out to each one of those, or do some type of manual logging into the devices to be able to update the software or configure it properly, and that is also just time consuming. Additionally, connectivity issues and security concerns, they kind of go hand in hand. Industrial environments are often very strictly regulated with firewalls, sometimes even air gapped. So how do you handle those types of issues when you're trying to essentially use web technologies in a very isolated, not necessarily internet connected space? And also, there's a lot of customers who aren't necessarily super keen on using cloud because of obviously inherent concerns with offloading data to some third party. So how do we handle those issues? How do we provide a cloud experience without sacrificing any of the security? And lastly, there's just a lack of easy to use tooling. You have a lot of different types of, in this, we're talking specifically about containerized software, which is obviously the new trend where everything is going. That's for the ship, all these microservices, et cetera. How to manage those containers, how to manage the software is not very intuitive today. You've got people whose only job it is to essentially run a Kubernetes cluster, for example. And the technicians on the ground, when they need to make a small fix or they need to see how things are working, that's such a technical overhead that first off isn't really in their scope of their job. And also it shouldn't be, right? They should be able to use these powerful tools to their advantage without having to amass hours and hours of technical experience to do so. So we're going to jump in here in just a second to the Portainer interface, and I'll give you an overview of kind of the life cycle. So how it would look from the, let's say, cockpit of Portainer. We're going to go over our intuitive interface. I think it's really great. We basically simplify all of these complex features, like I mentioned, of how to manage your software, how to manage your fleets in a very easy to use interface, something that is intuitive for any user with a little bit of knowledge. And to deliver the most power. I'm going to go over also the one-touch device onboarding, which is useful for provisioning large amounts of devices, so fleets of IoT or IIoT devices, without having to manually do such provisioning. Then I'll cover how to deploy applications, distribute them to the different devices, as well as how to manage configurations and also distribute those to the proper locations as well. So I'll take over the screen here and get right into the demo.
Absolutely. And while I'm adjusting a quick setting because I failed to do it, there you go. And Andrew gets set up just for everybody out that is attending today. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. Not only do you have myself, but we have Adolfo, who is near and dear to the Portainer family, and many of you probably heard a session from him before. So feel free, jump into the Q&A, and glad to have you. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, this is the cockpit that Portainer offers. This is a server that allows you to control all of your devices. If you're familiar with Portainer for more data center uses, this should look very familiar. For Edge, it is just the same. So we can see here that I prepared a few different environments to highlight how Portainer can be used to manage the heterogeneous infrastructures that you may encounter in industrial IoT. So for example, we have here a normal Portainer agent, which could be running in the cloud. Here I have some databases running, other pieces of software that generally have high availability, but usually would be used for collecting information from your industrial machines or industrial devices. Here at the bottom, and now this is going to be the focus for today's webinar, are these edge devices. Now we radically rethought about the way that the edge agent works. Traditionally speaking, Portainer would communicate with its worker agent, let's say, in a two-directional manner. That means you have to know the IP, you have to open inbound ports to these agents. So you have to do some types of configuration with firewall, etc. Our agent takes this and kind of flips it on its head. The agents are provided with the server address. So this server could be running in some data center, some on-premise server, just that it's accessible to these devices. And the devices actually just ping up to the server. What this allows us to do is to protect the security by not opening any inbound ports to these devices. We'll go into this a little bit later. But also still provide you with full connectivity and tunneling into the devices. So if I click here, just like you'd expect with a normal Portainer agent, in a second once it loads, we will see an overview of all of the services that are running on this device. So we can see the different types of images that we have downloaded, the volumes that are being used on this device, and the containers that are running. So this is completely, let's say, isolated from the server environment, but we still get this kind of granular view, and we're able to see what's happening in our industrial device. So let's go in and how we actually add these environments. And this is where it gets very interesting. So traditionally speaking, we would singularly add an environment. So you choose, oh, my machine has Docker running, or my machine has a Kubernetes cluster on it. You click through here and it shows you a very simple step-by-step process to start up an agent. You see here that we have two separate agents, the standard agent and the async agent. Fundamentally the same. The only difference is the async agent is more for high latency applications, or so the edge agent that's asynchronous actually just gives you snapshots of what's running on the device. But principally they function the same. So for this, we're going to focus on the standard edge agent. So that's great that we can add a singular device. It works great. I mean, obviously it works in the traditional data center sense. It works with some edge agents, but let's say we're going to a large scale industrial case. We've got a lot of different devices to provision, and we want to ship them to, for example, to a customer, or we want to just bring them to our technicians to install and boot up. This is a new feature that we just added into Portainer that is really, really neat. It's called auto onboarding, or one-touch onboarding. Here we actually can set we get provided with a singular script that can be provided to each of the devices that are being booted up or that need to be added to Portainer. And we can also pre-tag these devices to be in specific groups. So we can assign a group, an edge group, for example. So specific devices that you want to run edge applications on, we can put tags for what type of hardware it is. So right here I have some. So I'm just going to say AWS and Edge, and our second edge tag. These tags will be automatically applied to any device that starts up and runs this script. So I'll just add in a generator so that we can get an ID for each device. But essentially all we have to do from here is copy this and add it to our device, or add it to our startup script for our device, and Portainer will automatically receive a ping, and you can then add it into your managed Portainer environments. So I'll do that really quick right now just to show you kind of how that looks. So I'll just go here. This is obviously just a virtual machine, but you can imagine that this would be a device starting up in the field. If we go back to Portainer, we can go to the waiting room, and we can see that we are we are presented with a list of devices that are currently waiting to be added. So right here we have 2 that are waiting. This is the one that we just added. The reason that we added this waiting room is you have a lot of devices that are being started up, right? You want to have some control over what's actually entering into your managed space, right? So here, an administrator or a user can go in and say, okay, this is the device that I'm looking for. This is supposed to be joining, and it's supposed to be managed by Portainer. Let's add it in. So we can just click associate device. And just like that, we've added a new edge agent and an edge device into our system. So you can see how quickly that is, how quick that is to be able to add new machines, and how useful that could be when initially deploying your industrial IoT devices. And this obviously has, you can see that the heartbeat's already there, so it's fully functional and ready to go. The next part that I would like to show is how we then manage applications, getting the applications deployed to those devices. Because I added those edge devices in a singular group, I can show you that here actually before we go into it. You can see that all of them are automatically grouped together based on the tags that I provided in the beginning. So you can select between 2 different things. You can select between static, which means you have to manually add in the devices as they come in. Or you can use dynamic, which actually looks at the tags, depending on if it's a partial match or a full match. In this case, I used a full match. And as the devices are added to Portainer, they're added to the edge groups. This also means that any software that you have already deployed to that edge group, that will automatically be deployed onto the new devices as well. So it allows for high scalability, and then you really don't have to worry about redistributing software to new devices. If you should grow or if you remove devices, all of that is handled out of the box. So to get into the application deployment part, we'll go here and create an edge stack, and we'll call it OPC router. So I'm going to be deploying a tool from one of our partners, InRay. It's called OPC router. It's a great tool for helping you take data from OPC UA servers, for example, and piping it into different data services. So for example, what I'm going to show is taking data that's being pushed to an OPC UA server, pulling that out, and then pushing it to an InfluxDB so that we can visualize it from a few different machines. So here, what you're provided is a web editor where you can obviously type in a Docker Compose. So that's what this is all based on. You can type in a Docker Compose to describe your application. You can upload one, but I'll highlight a feature that I think is really neat and very powerful, but it's this repository, using a repository, this repository feature. So I have a repo already ready for this. You can see that here I have a Docker Compose file. I have some configurations. These configurations are actually listed by the names of the devices to which they should go. I'll explain that in a little bit. But I will take this, and if I can get there we go, copy the link and paste it here. Now Portainer will automatically go to this repository and check all the branches, kind of do a scan through all the different files and folders that you have in there. So for example, if you had a development branch, you could have some edge agents that are running development features or development applications. You could have some for test, you could have some for production. However you want it, you can select that here. In my case, I only have the main, so we'll just leave that for now. I'll type in the Docker Compose. You can see that it automatically fills that in for you because it looks through the repo. And we'll select GitOps updates. Now, this is a new powerful feature that we have that allows Portainer it says for Portainer, hey, check this repository for updates. You can have it as a polling. So here you can see every 5 minutes, Portainer will poll to see if there are any changes to the repository. Or you can use a webhook, which can be integrated in like a build pipeline, for example. We also can then go and say, all right, we've got our main Docker Compose, we've got the application that we want, but we want each device to receive a slightly modified version, or we want that application to run slightly differently depending on the device it's going to be on. So we can enable this feature here, this enable relative paths, which means it'll look through the repository, find the folders in there where the configurations are. We can type in configs as the folder to look in, and then we say match folder name, the internal folder from this configs folder, match those internal folders with the Portainer Edge ID that matches these devices. So we'll go down here and click deploy, and it'll take us to the stacks list. We'll see that the devices are receiving the deployment. Some have already started it up and have it running. And it'll just take a second, and then that will all go green. And if we wanted to, we can check in. We can go here, we can check and we can see, yep, we have this stack running. We can look and see that the container is running, and we are good to go. Now, to prove to you that, that these devices are running, that each of these devices down here are running a different version of the same software, I'll go into this InfluxDB like I mentioned. And we can refresh. It might just take a second here. I can actually just show you also internally. If I go here, we can browse into the temp folder and find the application. But so Portainer will actually send over that configuration to these devices, and it will run that configuration for the application. So I think that's a really neat feature, and it allows you to do very cool granular control of the devices that you have. If you wanted to add configurations after an application is already running, for example, you can go to our Edge configurations page. And similarly to what I had before, you can name the configuration, you can select the group that you want it to go to, put the directory on the device where you want the configuration to be placed, upload a zip similar to the with the hierarchy with all the different configurations in it with the device names or IDs, and you can even choose to match the files to the Portainer Edge ID, whatever. You can publish a general configuration. So those are two really cool, powerful tools that Portainer offers for the industrial edge. And if we want to go a little bit deeper, then we can go into the edge jobs. So beyond just sending configurations, we can actually send commands like apt-get updates and upgrade to upgrade different packages on your machine or on your devices. You can restart, so you can upgrade firmware also. One thing to note is even if you upgrade the firmware and you have a restart from the device, Portainer will automatically be restarted, and then once it is restarted, you get connections. You'll see that it comes back online, and you can access it and deploy applications just like I showed. So that's a little bit of the life cycle, for example, of how to provision devices, how to send applications out there, and how to send configurations. I'll stop here and go back to the presentation, but are there any questions so far?
No questions in particular so far, Andrew. I mean, I think you kind of hit all the key points. One question, you mentioned edge jobs. This actually came up in another session. So just kind of curious, what about firmware upgrades, operating system upgrades?
Yeah.
How does that look like? Is it capable within the platform?
Yeah, that is possible. One of our customers is actually doing that. They're upgrading the firmware just by they're putting in a bash script here, upgrading it, and yeah, so they can deploy it. You can even schedule it, right, like a cron job sort of. You can make it recurring, so you can handle it in many different ways.
Perfect, makes sense. I think that answers it, man. That's all for now.
Perfect. So now we'll get into the all-important security section. We'll just quickly go over some of the security issues that are facing industrial IoT. I covered them a little bit already with just talking about how the edge agents are working. But just to quickly go over it, we mentioned the firewalls and security policies. Obviously, the industrial environments are very secure. You have a lot of proprietary data, or you have information that you don't want necessarily leaving a premises. So, but you still want to have the control over the device. That's something that Portainer offers out of the box with our edge agents. So you don't have to worry about changing your firewall rules too much. You just have to really allow outbound connections from your devices. Additionally, Portainer can obviously be run on premise. So we offer the Portainer server and the agents as Docker images, so that can all run within your premises, and you don't have to worry about having that in a cloud or something like that. Industrial IoT obviously also requires role-based access controls. So not everybody should be able to deploy new applications or do those edge jobs like I just showed you there. So how do we deal with that? That's a big question that Portainer answers. Software patches and updates, I just briefly spoke about. Backup and restore. So for regulatory reasons, it's also important, not only just for security, but making sure that you can get to a previous version if something breaks or if required by law. Portainer also can help with some security holes that are somehow a little bit inherent with containers or Docker in general, and Portainer can kind of help seal up some of those attack vectors. And encryption. Portainer, all the communication is encrypted. We support mutual TLS. So that is also taken care of by the software. So just to switch back to the software really quick and show you what that looks like. Let's first go into the role-based access controls. So Portainer out of the box has its own user management system. You can see here that I have just a few users that I've already added to this environment. You can use this, but you can also link Portainer with your existing authentication system. So LDAP, Microsoft AD, OAuth. Portainer can also automatically create the users and assign them with the proper roles based on the structure that you already have in your authentication service. So this is really useful for already getting and integrating Portainer with your existing workflow. Portainer also shows you the logs for authentication, as well as the activities that have been taken. So, I mean, just even creating this, you can see that here. You can see the that I created that edge stack, and it's great for auditing and seeing who did what when. Additionally, I showed this briefly, so to go into a little bit of how we can lock down the device and the Docker security. We have these Docker features, these configuration here. So for example, we can prevent people from binding volumes. We can prevent privilege mode from running for non-administrators. We can stop containers from running in using PID1. So they can't run any type of command that they want to in the system. We can disable device mapping so that no one's able to see what devices are attached to the operating system. So there's some really cool features here that can kind of bolster the security of the device itself. As I showed before, you can enable this host management feature, which allows you then, this is what I did with the browse, which allows you to browse the file system. This also means you can close down the SSH port. So you can basically access all of the file structures through Portainer without exposing SSH to the outside world. So I think that covers most of the security features that I wanted to go into. So I'll just wrap it up, and then we can answer any questions, go in depth on some things if there's something that I didn't cover that you're concerned about. Let me just go back to the presentation.
Hey Andrew, while you're going back to that, before you hit that summary, man, why don't you hit upgrade to 2.19.1? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I didn't upgrade that. Yeah.
No, that would be the upgrade in the middle of a demo session would never be a great idea.
Right.
When it comes to security, right? The question I would have, and just kind of in general, you know, security is important, right? Shop floors, manufacturing facilities, smart buildings. In a lot of ways, you mentioned MTLS and RBAC and some of these other things, right? Those almost sound like IT concepts.
Yeah.
But from an OT perspective, what, and you kind of I guess with your background and kind of the folks you talk to,
Yeah.
how do you see Portainer in that OT realm, kind of leveraging IT technology, but even allowing it to be, simplified or consumable in a way that's maybe new to some of these OT folks?
Yeah, sure. So actually I should just jump back into the
Sorry, go for it. Feel free.
Yeah, so we have these roles. This is a pretty interesting. So exactly what you mean. So an IT person can set up Portainer, right, for your company, and they can set up this role management probably already exists for all of these employees anyway. But what we have in Portainer is also different levels of access. So we can provide read-only access to individuals who just need to understand, hey, what's going on this device or this machine. That's it. They don't need to touch any applications. They don't need to do any like firefighting, or if something goes down, they can just see that. We also have standard users that can control more things. Obviously, administrators. Yeah, so we can separate them out into different classes, let's say, of user, depending on the skill or the need. Yeah.
No, very fair. And I mean, whether the background is traditional IoT or OT, really the goal here is to simplify
Yeah.
kind of these consumption areas and really put it back in the hands of the individual user. And look, every organization is different, and really, I guess that's where the idea of simplicity within the platform comes from. So there's really just to meet people where they are, meet organizations where they are, but still provide that security first methodology and mentality.
Yeah,
Very
right.
cool.
So I mean, these features, I mean, the OT, these can be set up right, like before an OT professional has to even touch the system. They would have
Yeah.
to only focus on probably this page and just see what's happening. And I mean, if you look at this overview compared to the traditional terminal window, the black box, so to speak, this is a lot simpler. It's a lot easier to understand. I mean, for technicians developers like myself, for example, it's much easier to understand, much easier to visualize, to get a good glimpse of what's going on in the system, versus having to know all these different commands to do the same thing.
Very cool, man. Thanks for pivoting there, and let you close out, and then I'll come back and wrap us up.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, I guess we just kind of went through all of this. Obviously, there's a lot of different challenges in industrial IoT today, and a lot that I didn't mention even in this, but I think Portainer does a really good job of answering some of the questions of how do we provision our hardware? How do we deal with the application lifecycle? How do we deal with some of the security issues that come with that somehow don't seem to work with work with the IT or the cloud approach, so to speak, of data analysis and whatever, all the IT things that are going on right now. I think Portainer does a really good job of simplifying those out and making it easier to start on your industrial IoT projects. So, I mean, you have the management of the fleet, you have the one-touch onboarding, and all the security features that I just showed you.
Very cool. So what I'd say for kind of everybody who's joined today, really, first of all, thank you for joining us. We hope that you're a Portainer, community member, customer, whether you're exploring, whether you've been leveraging Portainer in your environments. Don't forget we have a lot of customers, and we've actually added a few additional stories around industrial IoT use cases over the past couple of weeks. Jump to a website, look at about our customers page. Some of the things that are happening, some of the things that are going on are just fascinating. Whether it's taking dumb machines in a manufacturing facility and turning them into smart devices, or even smart cities, is a super fascinating one for me. I mean, I'm a smart home, aficionado, and just the idea of a smart city and being able to manage all of the software aspects and hardware aspects all at the same time is really intriguing to me. And so jump out there, see what our customers are doing. But I'll say this: if you are going to be at SPS Trade Fair in Germany in a month or so, we'll be there with a few of our partners. We'd love to connect with you. If you happen to be at other events, that are happening over the next few months, we'll be in and around. Andrew would be a few of them as well, myself, and we'd really love to meet with you. Really love to connect with you. And lastly, upgrade to 2.19. Specifically, go to the dot release because that's always the best way to do it. But I'll say, Andrew, thank you for your time, man. Really appreciate you doing this. And to everybody who attended today, thank you for joining us. You are why we put these together. Reach out if you have questions. Show up in our Slack community, our GitHub, discussions. And as always, from a house cleaning perspective, we will share the webinar post event and make sure everybody who joined us was able to catch it. If they were not able to, maybe, I don't know if you're like me, attention span problems, but the good news, everybody who's joined us today is stuck around. So glad to have you. Thank you for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your day wherever you are. And really, thanks for attending. Have a great day, everybody.